This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today spent a decade advising global companies on technology, strategy, and growth. He graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering from IIT Bombay and completed his graduate studies at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, better known as MIT. Today, as a tech entrepreneur, he is the founder of Yellowdig, a community-driven, active learning platform adopted by over 130 colleges and universities, K-12 schools, and corporate training clients. Yellowdig's mission is to transform every classroom into an active, social, and experiential learning community. Please welcome CEO and founder at Yellowdig, Shaunak Roy. Welcome, Shaunak.
Yes, Michael, very, very excited to be on your podcast. I'm looking forward to really engaging conversation. So based on what we just talked about a little before we got started.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at this learning platform, there's a lot of things that pop out for me. One, my mother's an educator. She's over 30 years in the New York City Board of Ed. My wife is an educator. She's currently teaching young children in a sixth grade classroom in Poughkeepsie, New York, and working hard through a lot of the challenges that you talk so much about in terms of what you do at Yellowdig. And then myself, I just launched a leadership training program or a sales mindset mastery program, and was very interested in your platform because I'm going, maybe this could work for me too. So a lot of cool stuff for us to talk about. But as we kind of talked about before we turned the mics on and everything, I wanted to learn a little bit more about you and your background and your travels from India to the States, what that might have been like, and a little bit about your childhood if possible. Could you share a little bit about that with us?
Yes. No, I mean, part of being an entrepreneur has a lot to do with the life that we have grown into. So my journey started back in India. I grew up in a city called Calcutta, which is Northeast India. Average background, middle-class family. But one of the things which is unique about our family was education was very important growing up. My parents were always very interested for me to be well educated. So that was always, the expectations was always well set from my early age. I kind of knew that I have to go to college, and I have to build up myself to something in that domain. So my dad, had a business as a small manufacturing operation, and some of the early kind of funds, memories from my childhood is kind of really walking around in the workshop. He used to manufacture, battery operated cars, and not the cars itself, but various parts for it. So there were a lot of mechanical engineering happening in the workshop. So I remember kind of, walking around and looking at these small pieces and wondering how these pieces are made, and kind of really wondering and kind of, trying to see and imagine things that I could make and maybe growing up. So that definitely motivated me a lot. One of the things I always say is that a big part of my motivation in my life is kind of having the exposure of kind of really seeing my dad trying to build a business. It was a small operation by means, but kind of really seeing him going through the trials and tribulations of starting a company, but also seeing the freedom that he enjoyed, trying to build a company early on in a small way has played a big role in me. And my mom, was and is a homemaker, so she kind of took care of us growing up. I was one of those kids who was quite fascinated by a variety of things. I won't call myself as a great student. I always was one of those backbenchers, kind of really doing a variety of things, kind of sitting in the back bench and trying to get by school to an extent. So kind of went through that. It was a very engaging, very loving childhood. I was very fortunate to have a family who was very kind of loving and gave me a lot of opportunities growing up. Um, and yeah, I mean, then kind of one thing's led to another. I did end up studying kind of well to get into the right colleges, I would say. IIT Bombay was a difficult college to get into, but I think I studied well before the exams and kind of really got passionate about, I would say, into being an engineer. My dad had a mechanical workshop, so that probably played into it in terms of me kind of deciding to become a mechanical engineer, which I did. And then worked in India for a few years, and then kind of decided to come to the US. A lot of my friends I was close to in my engineering undergrad all came to the US, and I heard great things about the US. So I said, you know what, let me just go for an adventure. So that kind of took me to the US. Let me pause there. I don't know if there are any questions that come out from that background.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do have a lot of questions actually for you. What's really interesting to me is your father's story in all of this, and how you mentioned seeing him going through the different trials and tribulations. I'm interested in what some of those were, and what some of the learnings that came out of it for you were.
If I kind of zoom out and think about that part of my life, the thing that kind of really stands out is the freedom. Mm. I know, and my dad used to tell me that before he started his company, he had a job, and how much he hated it. Because it was like doing things that he probably didn't quite enjoy, and he only kind of lasted for a few years in that job. And then he kind of told me a story about how he actually started a company where, of course, he didn't have the money for that. He didn't come from money. He kind of did like one step at a time to kind of build a relationship that he had to, and raise the money that he had to kind of start a small operation. And that kind of grew over time to the size and that I remember when I was a kid. And that was quite interesting. I mean, what I really loved about that story was the freedom that he had in terms of kind of really doing what he loved to do, which is to kind of run his operation. And it took a lot of hard work. So I did kind of sense that building a business takes a lot of hard work. But I also saw that the benefits of the rewards, of that hard work is quite apparent. So I kind of always had that visual in my mind. And I remember telling him that, it's not that I want to do your business, and he eventually sold his business, but I want to find my own at some point. So which I did, by the way. I started, Yellowdig is my third company. I started two other companies before, but those were, I would say, smaller, tries at, when I was a student and things like that. But there's always this vision from that kind of early childhood that I wanted to be a founder or start something on my own and be free and do things that I love to do. And hopefully I find my own passion in that. Mm.
What would you call the hard work? What would you how would you describe the hard work?
The hard work part is, essentially, from my experience when I started, for example, Yellowdig, there's a lot of work that goes into starting a company that you end up doing, which you have no idea when you're working in a company. So, for example, before I started Yellowdig, I was, well employed in a consulting job. I used to work for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton, which was an amazing, really good consulting company, which gave me a lot of exposure. And I worked really hard. Meaning I worked from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. often, consulting and traveling across the US and having client meetings and coming up with strategies and all the things that you would do as a consultant. That was hard work. But when you start a company, your work is slightly different, where you don't have a very scheduled work because you're trying to figure it out. Especially as a young entrepreneur, you're trying to kind of you have a vision roughly, and then you're trying to get an operation going. So you're kind of doing a variety of odd things, maybe calling clients, making some sketches, thinking about some things that you want to build maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, and then kind of really going about it at a pretty intense level. That is hard work. And I've seen that actually when I started the company in the first couple of years, I was kind of doing a bunch of things. It wasn't that foreign to me because I've seen a little bit glimpse of that when I was young in my dad. So that definitely helped me. to get through that period, because I kind of knew that if I do it, if I make some smart choices, I'm going to make all the mistakes possible for sure. But if I make enough smart choices and if I kind of stick to the mission of actually studying something, I'll probably land in somewhere where I'll have an operation that I can scale from there. And that kind of at least that idea that was in my mind came from my childhood to a large extent. Definitely, I'll say that.
It's interesting too that you always knew you wanted to be a founder, but you still went and worked somewhere. And I would assume that some of that had to do with your educational background. So it's so funny. Overachievers always say, I wasn't a good student. I kind of got backbench, but you were backbench and you get into a really great prestigious college in university in India. And then you come to the States and you get into MIT, and obviously you're a high performer there. Could you share a little bit about that experience at MIT, because it's well renowned for technology and everything that you do there?
Yeah, I mean, if there's one word I'll summarize my MIT experience, it was inspirational. I met so many smart people, so many people who are kind of really thinking at such a different level that I have not experienced when I was in India. Of course, India was my formative years, and I met a lot of great people there. And I, did my undergrad in IIT, which was also very rigorous and very helpful for me. But MIT was a place where it was a very open culture, where there was nothing that I could not walk into a room and have a conversation with anybody. There was a lot of, of course, a lot of courses. I did my, master's, and I did end up doing 2 masters there. But the thing that stood out for me is essentially that inspiration part, where I have so many people I met and so many ideas I got. And I actually started a venture in MIT when I was a student, which was, it's a slightly different kind of a venture where I was building products using handicraft skills in India. So I partnered with a few organizations in India who had amazing handicraft skills, where they were kind of doing needlework. I don't know if you've seen any of those cushion covers and things like that sometimes you've seen like some high-end stores where they have these needlework of like artisans who do these kind of very intricate work. And I kind of really thought about making that whole operation much more efficient using technology, where I'll have relationship with the source, the people who are creating that artwork, but also kind of help them with support from a design point of view, a material point of view, and also the kind of distribution channels standpoint. So I kind of built up a website and kind of had some partnerships and some materials that I kind of sourced from a variety of locations and supplied that to those people who are actually doing the handicraft, and then sold it in the US. It was a complicated business, as you can imagine. It's a pretty complicated supply chain, but I kind of thought that would be an interesting business to start with. So I did that for about a year and a half when I was a student at MIT, and at the same time I was studying that time. So it was inspirational. I was so kind of amazed by what's possible. I said, what, if I'm at MIT, I better not only study, but actually try something and see if I can build something here. So that lasted about a year and a half, and then I actually got a job at Booz, and I also had a challenge around my visa situation, because I could not run a company on a student visa or with a work visa. So I had to get a visa sponsored by a company who would support my visa, and I'll work for them. So I had to stop that business and kind of took a full-time role.
When you started that first business of with that complicated supply chain, I'm interested in. Since you were a student and you were kind of like going back and forth, were you concerned about like solving a problem and finding a solution and whether there would be a market for it? Or was it more about the experience in that one?
It's a great question. But it was, I remember doing a little bit of market survey. What I did was I attended, when I was a student, I went to a few conferences where there are buyers and sellers of high-end handicrafts. And that was the business I was getting into. So I remember coming to I was in Boston. I took a bus to come to New York and, attended one of those conferences there. I went somewhere else as well. So I did a little bit of market survey just to see if there is a demand for the product I was looking to build. But it wasn't like a kind of a thorough survey in terms of what's the market size and what's the growth rate and what are the challenges, what's the competition like, how much capital you need to get a business started. I didn't have enough exposure to kind of do that level of analysis, but it was mostly product-driven analysis, which was helpful. And then I went to India for about one of my summers. I decided not to take an internship and actually go and spend about 3 months with those artisans in India. So I went there and I kind of really lived with them for a few months. It was interesting, actually living almost in a village, and really saw their lifestyle and saw, it was quite inspirational for me to kind of see what they're doing, and then, build up a few relationships with some vendors there who would supply me the materials that I will distribute to those handicrafts out to those artisans who will do the artwork on those materials. And then I'll have another vendor who will ship it to the US. And then in the US, I had a few distribution channels that I had set up based on my kind of relationship that I had set up early on. So yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it was not, as you were saying, I did not do too much of like real market analysis and survey. It was almost like diving in and trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
Maybe that's in my nature also a little bit. So that's kind of what I ended up doing.
Yeah, certainly. And speaking of your nature, I'm interested in what your parents were thinking while you were doing this, because it's obviously not one of the traditional ways of creating an income, but being that your dad has that background, I'm interested in what kind of support you received.
Yeah, you know what? I have been so lucky because I remember growing up, my parents were quite concerned about me getting a good education. So they made sure that whatever other things I used to do, I mean, I'm getting the support needed or the time that I have to get to a good college, which I ended up doing. But as soon as I got into a college, I mean, they were completely hands off. They were like, do what you like to do, and just make sure that you are not completely doing something crazy, but as long as you're doing and following your passion, I'm totally fine. So I remember my parents were totally fine. I mean, yeah, you're doing something, hopefully you're doing something good. Sometimes I'll talk to my dad or mom about it, but they would be mostly hands off.
So what was the second business that you started then?
Yeah, so this one that I explained was my second business, which was when I was in MIT. My first business was in IIT, which is when I was doing my undergrad in India. So that business was interesting again. So, I was doing my undergrad in mechanical engineering, which was good, but I was not quite. I felt that it was great education, but I could not find my passion there, because mechanical engineering was by then not seen as something which is cutting edge, right? Where you're building the new products and services, cars and things. It has been there for, ages. Of course, things have changed now with Elon Musk, and kind of SpaceX and other things. I mean, I would love to go and probably build a rocket again, but we were not really thinking about that back then. So I convinced a few of my friends to build an app which runs on a phone to do voice to text translation. Essentially the idea was that, and that was early 2000. There was no Apple phone that time. We had those Blackberries that time, just to kind of see, like, if you're browsing a website, the idea was that can we kind of translate the text in the website into a voice based navigation system, so that you don't have to really scroll through those like very clumsy little screens. And the idea was based around that screens that Blackberries or the old school phones would offer, which is not very easy to navigate. It wasn't that as slick as like iPhones and what we are used to right now. There were no smartphones back then. So that was the idea, and that was very relevant. And that day and time, I won't think that would be very relevant right now. So that was my first business. We did a bunch of things. We made a prototype and we showed to a few people. We had a few users, but nothing crazy. It kind of stopped. It was almost ended like a school project or whatever.
So it was like self-funded, but there was really no revenue coming in.
That's exactly right. I mean, we got a little bit of funding because we applied for a business plan competition and we won it. Cool. So that gave us a little bit of funding to do a bunch of things. But yeah, it did not really go through a proper funding process.
Was that Steve Jobs that funded that portion of it to see if he could get into Apple?
Oh,
I want to paint a picture for everyone of the phone that you're describing, because for our younger audience, you just reminded me, you sent me back to the BlackBerry of like what was like this big technological advancement was when they put the ball on it. Do you remember they put the ball in the middle of the keypad and that was our mouse?
Yes. I remember that was the navigation we were using that time. So you scroll through the ball and there would be a little menu. You go through
Yeah.
that, and then the menu can read only 3, 4 words. But if it's like a paragraph, how do you explain that? And
Right.
that's what we were trying to explain the paragraph into like a few words,
It,
So
it's incredible
interesting.
where our phones went from to where they are today. It's just like, and I have children. I have 2 daughters. That's Denise and Tenley. That's who our insurance company is named after, Den 10. And they're 6 and 8. And they know, and this is no surprise to anybody with young children, they know how to operate the phone, and it's amazing. And you could just, if you when we show them phones, like the old phones, because of course I keep them, because it's like keeping like an old rotary phone. They're like, how do you even operate this thing? This thing's weird. You mentioned. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have daughters too, 2 daughters, and I completely agree. I mean, honestly, like for a 2 or 3-year-old, they can navigate the entire phone, go to various websites, watch YouTube videos, go to TikTok, watch that. I mean, they should not be probably, but they can. So the amount of advancement we have done in technology in the last 20 years is just amazing. If you take that like a long view on it.
Yeah, and I definitely don't want to forget about bringing up ChatGPT because I'm sure that we'll have some nice conversation around that. I want to go to Elon Musk for a second. You brought up mechanical engineering and how it kind of shifted from back then to where it is today. What do you see in the mechanical engineering space today, and what, like you said, Elon Musk with building rocket ships, and what is that leading? What do you see that leading to in our world today?
The big change I see, and I graduated from my undergrad in 2001. So it's been like almost 22 years since I completed my undergrad. Back then, mechanical engineering, for you to build anything, you needed a huge operation, meaning that you had to have a big machine that you will cut materials into pieces. You need big CAD/CAM computers to design various parts that you want to do, and then you can probably make something, right? But that's going to be very expensive. You can't do on your own. You need, essentially operational support and fair amount of investment to build anything. So a lot of the studies were very theoretical for us. So we kind of studied like thermodynamics or like, or physical, like various physics problems that we will kind of spend a lot of time on. We'll do a lot of drawing to kind of create, structures that we can't build, but we can actually visualize that will be there. The difference today is that, a lot of that has become very easy to make. Like, for example, 3D printers. You can come up with a part and you can just 3D print it, and you can build something which is fairly operational without really relying on a big machine that you have to go to, right? So a lot of the hard work that we used to do manually can be automated now. You have very high-end softwares by which you can model things. You can build like a little car or a rocket. I mean, not a rocket that you can launch, but at least a prototype that you can build. So that has, I think, unlocked a lot of creativity in mechanical engineers who can now build new things without relying on a huge amount of investment. And also like companies like SpaceX or others, I mean, there are many other examples, are really going to the next level of our kind of society where it's beyond software. Like a lot of the innovation that has happened in the last 20 years is around software. Like we spend so much time. I run a software company, but the next generational innovation is a mix of software and hardware that kind of changes your life in different ways. That wasn't possible before. Like even the Boring company that he has, where he is building, super fast trains from, SF to LA and things like that. That's a very interesting engineering challenge that changes our lifestyle completely, right? It's not only just building better cars. It's kind of really reimagining your lifestyle. I don't think that was possible 20 years back. And I think there's a lot of opportunity now. Like engineers who are coming out today can really build these systems which are beyond software, where mechanical engineering and other kind of types of engineering will kind of play a role, almost like a systems engineering approach, which is kind of very interesting right now.
It is. And I think rather than holding off on this, because I just feel like it fits in perfectly in this conversation, is, if 3D printers, when they first started out, there was this whole uproar about them. And you go into the air quotes of taking away jobs. Of course, ChatGPT is now the big one, getting that kind of asterisk next to its name. and AI more specifically. I'm interested in, how do you see, since 3D printers helped advance a lot that happened in mechanical engineering, how do you see AI advancing what's happening in that space as well?
That's a very interesting domain. To be honest, like I'm starting to put my head around AI, and I'm kind of consuming all the information that all of us are consuming, right? That's coming out around ChatGPT and all the benefits and all the big risks around AI that we have to manage. So in terms of the benefits, I see there is a tremendous amount of benefits in AI, right? For example, ChatGPT, one of my daughters is doing kind of tutoring using ChatGPT, where she's kind of posting problems and she's getting the results, and then she's kind of asking follow-on questions to get better results. So almost you would have to need a tutor. I would have to do it myself, but ChatGPT can do it a large extent to some of that. And I see there are better apps coming up. I was looking at a video by Khan Academy. They're launching what they call is Khan Amigo or something like that, which is almost like you can go in and ask questions and get results, almost as a tutor on the side, one-on-one tutor. So that's just one example. I mean, there's so many other use cases of ChatGPT I can see, or the large language model-based AI, which is going to revolutionize, I think, education and work and manual tasks. And there's something called AutoGPT that I've been hearing about, which can actually take, automate tasks for people, when you can actually ask it to like do I was listening to one of the podcasts where talking about like, you just do a restaurant reservation and they will actually look up which restaurant is available and do the reservation for you, where you had to make a phone call before. Now it can automatically do it. Now, a lot of this is very primitive right now, but I can imagine in the next, the way technology develops in the next 2, 3, 4 years, some of this is going to be very good and very efficient and very precise, which is going to make our lives easier to a large extent and probably add us more value. It's going to reduce the information overload and give us very precise information or summarize it for us, which is going to be helpful. The flip side is also, as you can imagine, is equally, issue. There are two big flip sides. One is, of course, what happens to the jobs. We're already hearing, I just heard from IBM, I believe they're cutting jobs because they're going to automate a bunch of their roles in AI because it could be a lot more efficient. I think that's going to have an impact across the board because people are going to lose jobs. A lot of the jobs that were very manual or could be, based on basic skills could be replaced by AI. I think it would be replaced in a matter of time. So what do we do about that? What do we do about reskilling them into new kind of technologies or new kind of using AI to actually get to higher value roles, which is one big issue we haven't quite figured out. The other big issue is that AI getting out of control, right? Because, ChatGPT, if you don't make sure that those AI models are built in a way that's actually helping us and not going to create any sort of mental decision, especially in kids, right? Like, for example, Facebook has been around for 15 years now, and now there's a lot of talk about the negative impact of Facebook and Instagram, especially, young people, especially young women, like, there's so much talk about it can actually cause a lot of mental issues for you if you spend too much time in social media, because of so many kind of effects of social media that is not very apparent in the beginning. Now, we all thought social media is a very simple thing where you connect with people and get information. That's all good. But there is a negative effect on a psychological level that we are starting to understand. We still don't know quite yet what the negative effects are, but we know there is negative effects, right? So same thing for GPT or AI. I think there is a negative effect of GPT that we just don't quite understand, right? I mean, if ChatGPT is giving us responses onto our questions, but those responses are biased in some sense, or slowly nudging us in a direction which AI thinks is the right way of thinking. But if you don't have the analytical skill sets to analyze it ourselves, and we are blindly trusting those results, especially if those models are not quite, unbiased, right? I mean, it depends on what does bias mean. There's such a big topic. It can lead to very subtle changes in human psychology that might lead us to a path which 10 years down the line, we'll suddenly realize, oh my God, what happened here? We got programmed by AI and we are living miserable lives because, maybe we think we are smarter because we have a bunch of information, but our psychological mindset probably got completely, disrupted by AI models that we have no idea. So there's so many things that are risky about it also. So that's why I feel that we have to be very conscious about how we are using AI and kind of really put a critical lens on everything that is being developed around AI. And I know there's a lot of talk going on in this area, but I do feel that there is a lot of risk around it that we need to be conscious about.
That's thank you very much for elaborating on that. That's pretty incredible stuff. It's one of the cool things that I see in the AI space and the chat GPT, well, AI, I'm going to say not chat GPT because it didn't work in this space, is I'm a big basketball fan, and I don't get to watch too many games anymore because of the entrepreneurial lifestyle, this so-called freedom that we have. But I was watching a video of a YouTuber who, that's pretty much where I get all my basketball information from. He found a couple different AI sources that were able to predict correctly the last 3 years of champions for the NBA. And right now the NBA finals are going on. So it was very interesting on its prediction of who's going to win this year. And it was accurate every year. So it's pretty interesting on how this can all work out and play out. But I also agree with your caution of the bias, because, I mean, when we think about almost anything that we consume in terms of media, even this podcast itself has its own bias of my own ideas and my own thoughts of how I want to ask questions, and perhaps of the guests I interview and how you decide to frame things and everything. So there's always some sort of bias. So I think that critical thinking is so important, that regardless of what we do, critical thinking is one of the foundation to being able to go on in society and have a productive life. So that's one of the things I would maybe point out there for everyone, is just to consider that and stay inquisitive as to why did that answer come to play. As we kind of go back to Yellowdig, and it's interesting because it's kind of like on the heels of this conversation in terms of social media. And what I've noticed with a lot of companies that are trying to change what's happening in the social media world is that they're creating their own platforms, and they're creating their own social platforms. I'm big into self-development, and I'm part of Growth Day, which is a self-development platform. And in there, when I started going in there, I noticed that I joined Growth Day because of the learning aspect of it. There's courses, there's a journal, there's all sorts of different things. And Brennan Burchard, who's the founder of it, does these live events every Wednesday where he has different keynote speakers come on, and you could learn from these keynoters once a week, which is just incredible. So I joined it for that reason. And then I learned while I was in there in the platform that it's got its own social media thread. It's got its own thread where you could post pictures, post thoughts. It has its own areas where people can host their own live events in the app. And I think about that and other apps, and just using that one as an example, is that it's kind of shifting away from the Instagrams and the Facebooks to get away from that, like as you said, that negative vibe that happens there. And there's a lot of positivity that happens on social media. I don't want to, just completely bash it, because I know that, like, on my social media thread, I only follow really inspirational people, positive thinkers, people that are doing good in the world. And so therefore my threads are typically positive quotes and inspirational things. And I do an IG Live every single morning where I put out positive messages and messages to help people. So I think it could be used in a very good way. But you did something, and you were inspired, I guess, by social media with Yellowdig and the education background. And so I'm interested in, back in 2014, when you started formulating this idea of this company, what was kind of like the first piece of the puzzle that came together for you? Was it the social media angle, or was it the education angle? Where did this all stem from?
Yeah, that's a great question. Back in 2014, when I started the company, I was thinking of starting the company in 2015 when we launched the platform. One of the early kind of triggers for me to think about this as a platform was the benefits of social media, which is, Facebook was kind of getting going that time. Getting going, they had been around for a while, but it was really kind of becoming a mainstream platform back in that time. And LinkedIn and others were also getting a lot of traction. So my hypothesis was that, social media is not going to be something which is just a blip in our lives, like it happened and we forget about it and we move to the next thing. It is fundamentally changing humanity. Um, you know, Facebook has like billions of users now. We are all connected because of social media to a large extent. In LinkedIn, you can go and look up anybody pretty much, right? You can see their background, at least their work history. You can have a sense, you can have a conversation with them if you think that would be relevant. So that aspect of connecting us in a seamless way was quite attractive to me. Kind of the problem that I noticed is I grew up in India, for example, right? I have my relatives there. How I am in touch with them is through Facebook to a large extent. My work relationships over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, I'm in touch with them through LinkedIn because I see them posting in LinkedIn. I kind of reach out to them once in a while. At least, even if I don't talk to them, I know where they are. And that kind of connection wasn't even possible before. So all of that kind of gave me this idea that, education is also similar in that sense because, we love to learn by discussing ideas with one another. There is, of course, a part of learning which happens because of watching a YouTube video or a lecture or being in a classroom, which is consuming of content, which is important. But there is also an aspect of learning which happens by discussions. And if you're in a classroom, if you go back to your classroom days, sometimes the case study discussions that something will happen in a classroom where people will speak up on their own points of views around a case study, or people will kind of debate a topic, or they will share materials which is out there, like I found this video or something which is relevant to what we discussed last week, or this material. And this doesn't only have to come from the instructor or the professor. Everybody's learning can actually bring those resources to one another and actually have a discussion around it. And they can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the same classroom, right? It could be anywhere, in the world or any parts of the country, or it doesn't really matter. So I could see that there is a value of a platform where people can discuss and debate and go deeper in a topic in a social media style, but not on Facebook or not on LinkedIn. Because imagine you want to do the same thing in LinkedIn. I mean, it's going to be very difficult because LinkedIn is designed to create a brand for yourself to a large extent on your work history. Facebook is for connecting with friends and family. You want to see your kids, you want to see your family photos, you want to see where you've been for vacation, you had a birthday party. Those things are very relevant in Facebook kind of an environment. So it's also very environment specific. What's the context of that? And the app that you were talking about, that's designed for self-development, for example, right? So if you have a community of people who are all focused on self-development, they coming together creates a very different vibe. And then you need features and functionalities around it. So I had a very similar idea, I would say, to that too, but focused on learning. So we built the app and we went to various schools and we said, you know what, do you want to use this thing? And of course, in the beginning, it was like, okay, what's the value of this kind of an app? But now over time, what we have seen and we have shown is that if you have learning in the context of a community is always better than learning just on your own. And colleges, universities, high schools, we spend trillions of dollars globally to create those spaces. The whole idea of a campus is that students get together and they actually meet with one another. And that's, you go to your football game, but you also want to be in your classrooms or you want to be in your lecture halls or whatnot. So that was designed for the last 50, 100 years. But the future of that is essentially a community where you are connected as part of a community and you can find things and meet people and discuss things naturally. Where is that going to happen? Right? Somebody has to build that app for that to happen. And that's what Yellowdig is to kind of create that virtual campus to a large extent, but it could be a virtual classroom too, that you can meet people and engage with one another.
And I'm always interested in the name. So in all of that, I'm wondering, okay, so where does Yellowdig come from then?
Yes, I get that question. I have got that question so many times. Like, what's the name? And it's very interesting because when I started, right, I had I would say, an idea of this vision back then that we want to build towards, but I didn't really have a concrete idea. This is how exactly it's going to shape up. Or I didn't really start with that. I really started with a kind of a mission. And so the word yellow, so every color has what they call is a color psychology or a color meaning behind it. So for example, yellow stands for cheerfulness and fun. And if you see yellow color, it makes you happy. It makes you bright and sunrise, and everything is bright and yellow, and I love that color. I thought that, what, if you're building something in education, it has to have that feeling. It can't be dark. It can't be like something which is like, and that's one of the problems of education. So yellow was that. I like the color. I like the name of I like the meaning. So I decided to put that name. And the dig part came from, digging together. So if you're a community of 50 students and, you're listening to a class, your professor, you're learning something, but hey, if you discuss things with one another and just be vulnerable and talk openly, you'll learn so much more, right? Everybody has their own perspective. So that was the digging part. So I kind of said Yellowdig is what it is.
And dig in a little bit more.
And to be very honest, I thought it'll only last for a few years. I mean, I never knew that I'll be doing it for 8 years around. And, so now people ask, okay, now it's a name, people use it, it's fine, it's stuck. So, but it's different also. It doesn't give a vibe. It's an education company or social media company.
That's cool. And I like the social media aspect of it that you brought in. Could you share, since you didn't, and I love that you didn't know it would last for so long. It's so cool. It's such an entrepreneurial mindset of like, let me build something, let me have a vision on something. It's really cool. And what's the next thing around the corner? What was the journey like from then to where you are today?
It was interesting. We launched our first app in 2015 that grew the business. And then we realized that there's a bunch of things we want to change in it. So long story short, 2018, we decided to rebuild the app. So we kind of rebuilt the entire thing from ground up and relaunched it in 2019. So I went through the first, I would say, pivot or iteration of the business. And 2019 is we launched, and then COVID happened right after that.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. So we went through that
period. Yeah, it was an interesting time. In all, there was good and bad in everything, but I think overall we benefited through that transformation of how learning happens now is mostly hybrid, as opposed to there's a fixed way of learning. Now a lot of universities are offering online courses, hybrid courses. Students are expected to be anywhere in terms of learning, and our app actually supports that, which I don't know whether it would have happened without COVID at the rate we have seen now.
I was going to ask you in terms of that rate, like, what kind of spike did you see when COVID happened?
The app that we launched in 2019, it had only one customer, of course. We only started with one customer. And then, during COVID, we rapidly grew to about dozens and dozens of universities were signing up with us. And then, yeah, I mean, now we have over 150 universities using us, getting towards 200 pretty soon. So I think the spike was the need for the platform went up dramatically during COVID. But 2020 was an interesting time for us. Like, it wasn't that the need went up, but the market kind of collapsed. If you know that, enterprise buying almost stopped. So schools came out to us, said that we love the platform, we want to use it, but we don't know who to buy. We don't know who the budget owner is. We don't know who can actually make a decision for us because everything is closed down right now. We're offering online programs over Zoom, and Zoom is not the right solution. And that a platform like Yellowdig can add a lot of value and things like that. So we gave the platform for free, actually, to a large part of 2020. So that's how we drove up the demand of the platform, and we started monetizing that in 2021 too. And that's how we grew.
When you think back about some of the objections that you had previously to COVID, to online learning, did COVID really overcome a lot of those objections because people were confined to their homes, or was it more of where COVID showed these people that whether people were confined to the home or not, this is a model that they should adopt?
Yeah, we are still going through some of that change, but I think the biggest change COVID drove was change in behavior. Meaning, just like we are now so used to working from home.
Right.
Like, imagine before COVID, like if somebody says that I'm going to work like 4 days from home and one day I'll get into office, which is, by the way, our model right now, it would be like crazy. Like, is that really possible? Like, first question is that possible? Like, can we really get the work done? Even if you're working from home, and are there ways to coordinate? I mean, that we have proven now that, to a large extent, you can do it, right? There's some design needed around it so that we are efficient. Same thing has happened in learning too, where before COVID, the idea was that, yeah, you can only learn if you're in person. Yeah, you can do class online, but that's on the side, but you only learn when you're together. But then through COVID, now people have realized that online learning is as efficient, could be even more efficient in many ways, and more open and more democratic in that sense, if you than in-person learning. So that behavior change actually COVID drove. I think a lot of schools, instructors, students, parents kind of thought that that's not possible. Now they know that that's possible because they've gone through that change. So that is basically what has happened in this space for us. And I think, what I see is that just like work from home is going to be a long-term trend, and there will be various variations around it. Similarly, for learning is going to be hybrid going forward. So you don't have to quit your job and go to a campus, or you can still keep your job and learn online and then go to campus maybe once a week or once a month to meet with your professor, with your students and things like that. So I think that change, it's going to be a long-term trend, but I think COVID was a big driver of that behavior change.
Yeah, I like that you call it a behaviors of objections. But I mean, before COVID, that was a big thing, was you're not going to learn anything online. You can't learn that way. You have to go to a classroom and all that stuff. And I mean, for me, I've worked from home even when I worked for companies for most of my career. Pretty much all of my career. Now, when I think about it, I think there was only a small stint that I had to go to an office every day. But outside of that, being an outside salesperson, it was report to the office maybe once a week. In fact, on the sales side, I remember, and I would assume that this was the same all around, because everybody in the office talked about it, was if you're in the office, you're not selling. So, I mean, and, I say I work from home because I was either on the road, or why would I drive an hour to go to the office when I can just do a lot of the work that I'm doing at the office from home? My manager didn't care whether I was doing it from home or not, because as long as we're selling, you're selling, right? Where I'm going with the whole other side of this was, before COVID, again, going back to online learning, people were kind of adverse to it. But for me, I learned a lot of the things I do through YouTube videos, through online. I mean, it wasn't dedicated online courses like what you offer at Yellowdig, but I mean, I was going through the people that inspired me and that I thought were thought leaders and that I wanted to learn from, and with their strategies that they were doing, learn what they are. And I did it all through YouTube videos. So it was like, COVID only showed us that that's possible to some of the people that thought it wasn't possible, which is very interesting. Could you share a little bit more about Yellowdig and how the platform works?
Yeah, no, I think happy to share. And by the way, it's a very interesting thing that it was always possible, right? I mean, online could have been a great thing even 20 years back. I mean, we had the basic technologies, it's just that we didn't use it. And people who were passionate about using it, that now it's becoming mainstream. I think that's the big change that's happening now. In terms of platform, it's a software as a service company we provide support as well. So essentially what we do is that we license our platform to our clients or institutions that are using us, mostly higher education, but we also have K-12 and corporate training programs that are using us. And we integrate into their systems, though, as any organization, they have multiple different things that they use for training and providing online education or hybrid education. So we integrate that so that it's a very seamless experience for the students. One click, they can join our platform. And the value for them is, like what would be a kind of a non-engaging online experience. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, if you have kids, or if you go to any online, school, your experience is very, very kind of static in some sense, right? I mean, you kind of go to the class, attend the lectures, you come back and you kind of do your assignments. But when you have Yellowdig, you always have a community with you. So if you're in a economics 101 class and you attended the lecture, maybe in Zoom or any other software, or maybe in person, and in that evening, you're reading a chapter, you have a question, you just put in the community and somebody will answer it. Instructors can create very interesting simulations or debates on our platform, where they can ask questions on a weekly basis, or they will assign a topic. Let's talk about this topic this week, and next week something else. And everybody is encouraged to participate. We have a point system which we track participation. And that can be used for participation grading, which is one of the kind of sticks we have to get everybody into it. So as you can imagine, online forums, like only 5% will talk, majority won't. But what we find is that if you give them an incentive to go in and they start talking, they actually like talking. That's what people are, right? So we get them through that hurdle through our gameful learning or point system. So that happens. So a lot of instructors are very amazed by, I thought that my students don't want to talk, but I know, if you get them in, they will like to talk, and and they get into a lot of engaging debates if you design that experience. And then outside the classroom, if you have questions about, let's say, I need help on my essay, I have to write an essay, but I don't know, I don't speak English well or whatnot. You can go to the community and ask that, hey, I need help in this. Somebody will help you out. Maybe another student or some other, somebody in the university can help you out. You're looking for a job and, you need help with your resume. I need to get prepared for my interview. Can you give me some resources? Of course, you can find in Google, but you have a community with you now. Because you're going to the school, you're paying for it, and those schools would like to help you and they have the resources available. So we are just making it easy for them. And always as part of a community, because why not, right? If you have a community around you, it's a lot more fun than just kind of talking to one person. And you can do one-on-one too. I mean, we have that capability in our platform where you can just jump onto one mentor or one support resource who will help you out. So I think that's how it works. So we kind of make the digital campus. That's what, community network. It's a community, but it's a network, and hopefully you're building more connections when you're there, so that when you're graduating, you just don't know 5 people, but you know 500 people.
Yeah.
And then you can get to know them in LinkedIn or whatnot, or you can be in Yellowdig also, and that's also available.
That's pretty cool. And, you're always innovating and always trying to find new ways to improve the platform. So I'm curious as to what challenges do you see now ahead, in whether it's in the platform or just in technology and education, that you're trying to solve for?
Education, I think, is going through a pretty steep innovation cycle right now because of COVID, right? Because of move to online, and a lot of schools are facing enrollment challenges. If they're not innovating and increasing their experiences, there is very limited reason for a student to spend like $100,000 or even like $20,000 to go to a school and not get that digital experience that is going to help them, right? So I think that is driving a lot of universities to actually spend money in this area and innovate, and which is a great time for us to build a company right now. In terms of new innovation, like AI is going to play a role, because we have now very intelligent systems that can use that data to actually help students who are at need, like real-time help, as well as nudging students who need the help. So we are kind of looking into those kind of technologies to incorporate into the platform. Virtual reality or metaverse is kind of gaining some traction. For example, if you are, if you're in a lab, you really want to interact with the, stuff, right? Machines or chemicals or whatnot, but how do you do it online? I mean, you can potentially do it using metaverse or some sort of virtual reality solution. So there are some very interesting experimentations happening right now. It's still a very early stage, but I think there is a lot of potential in kind of creating that 3D experience for students when it makes sense. Then also, I think the other exciting part of our education now is that as we use technology, we can dramatically reduce cost. Because, if you look at the cost of education, like the real cost is actually maintaining physical assets like buildings and campuses and salaries of people. It's a huge operation. Typically universities, how they are, which is why education is so expensive, and it's dramatically expensive. As we move online and create those experiences, which are as good as being in person, which is possible, I think we can dramatically reduce cost and make it available to a lot more people. So imagine you go and get a bachelor's degree in, your passion area, for like $10,000 as opposed to $50,000. It'll still cost money, but it could be much lower. And I can imagine in the next 5-10 years, we are going to see schools which are digital first, I mean, we know the online schools have been there for a while, but they were not digital first, right? They were mostly still operating in the old model. And but now you can have, like, imagine a school which has that engagement, and then you can virtual reality, and you can engage with anytime, anywhere, and you can meet people and do experimentations together. And they're really reimagining college. We have talked about it for a long time, but I think it's coming in the next 4, 5 years, 10 years for sure.
Wow.
So we'll see, who does it. I mean, it's an interesting time.
That's pretty cool. And so because you have this like serial entrepreneurial mindset about you, are there any other companies that you have that kind of like buried under a blanket right now that you might be sneaking out at some point?
This company is keeping me quite busy. I would say like quite busy right now. But one of my most joyful experiences is when I discuss business ideas with other people, other entrepreneurs. So there's always ideas we're discussing. It's just that, I don't have the capacity to do another company right now, but yeah, I mean, I would love to at some point when I have, when I'm done with, building Yellowdig to the point that, it has grown to a point and that I have more time, of course.
Yeah. So are you still coding yourself, or do you more manage the day-to-day?
I'm more managed day to day, but I'm quite involved with the product side of things because that's my passion. I love it. I love to kind of discuss ideas, features, functionality, and everything else. But our team, does most of the work, and it's doing pretty well. What
do you think is one of the greatest, I guess, strengths that you have in terms of leadership? Since you're so focused on the product side, there's so many other sides of operations and sales and all these other things. So in order to inspire all of these different teams and departments, what's one of the strengths that you have to be able to do that?
I think what I've seen is, my friends who have been very successful entrepreneurs, and I've seen many very successful entrepreneurs over the years, and I've seen my growth as well. I think it comes down to kind of being very conscious about what you're good at and what you're not so good at, so that you have people to help you in those areas. And for me personally, I think I'm good at building products and thinking about how to solve a problem using a product or a service or technology. I think I'm good at that. I think I'm good at identifying people who can help in various areas of that vision. And kind of keep them motivated to kind of build with us. I mean, I think, and there's no secret sauce there. I think you're doing the right things, hopefully, so that, we are doing the right things. I mean, I think that kind of has its own momentum. So I think that's what's been going there. And I've been kind of trying to do that as much as possible. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'm good at. And there are other areas where I'm not so good at. And there are other team members who jump in and kind of make sure they do that. So I think that's the secret sauce. I mean, to be honest, like, I don't think there is a kind of silver bullet to be an entrepreneur. I think it's just about kind of really understanding what you're good at, what your desires are, and then kind of really creating a plan and a vision. I think that's important to be an entrepreneur, and then kind of getting other people involved is what it takes.
Yeah, and I guess having them see that plan and vision and trusting them to that they believe in it and that they're going to carry it out in their department. It sounds like that you have a lot of trust in your team.
Yes. Yeah, I trust my team. I try to delegate as much as possible. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it is.
Yeah, that's really, really great. I always like to ask something about a way that people live their lives and their mantras. And one that I found about you in terms of a success mantra that you have, and you could change it if you'd like, but I'm just interested if you could elaborate on this one that I found, which is, it's easier to be motivated, grow, and be recognized for your contributions if you are motivated by the impact you create.
Yes, no, I'm glad. I'm not sure where you found it, but I think that's spot on. Because what I've seen is that, and it's not only for me, but also the team, is, from a motivation standpoint, you want to start a company or, take a job is because of money first, probably, right? I mean, you're going to make some money now or in the future, could be one motivation. Maybe one of the big reasons people actually work, like get up from bed and just go to work anywhere, right? The other motivation could be like, family or somebody you want to take care of, and that's why you do things. But what I've seen is what has kept us going in our ups and downs is the results that we've seen. Like sometimes like we see some of our customers will like write to us saying that, hey, this actually happened and I love this thing. And one of our teammates we were on a call yesterday was saying that, hey, I went to this conference and people were stopping by and said, hi, we love Yellowdig. I mean, that was a big thing for him, right? I think that drives people to a large extent, and that happens because we focus on the impact that we are creating. It's a balance always, right? It's a balance around creating impact and having an operation that actually can sustain itself and grow. I mean, that's definitely a balance. But the impact part is sometimes I do feel that sometimes it's not talked about enough, or people just talk it as a buzzword, like saying, hey, we want to create impact, but what does that mean in real sense? Like, are you creating impact from really high quality user experience? And then that could be an impact, or it could be that, hey, I'm helping students to finish college in this specific way and they're getting a great experience. So that part I've seen is probably the big thing that has motivated me and keeps me on this journey, and as well as a lot of our team members.
And when you think about impact, I'm interested in this because I was dealing with a situation recently where we set a goalpost, and the person felt overwhelmed by this goalpost. And what I let them know was that, it's just a goalpost. It's just there to kind of like guide us. But, really what matters is that you put the work in every single day. And if you get to that goalpost, then great. And if you don't, when we get to that space and time, which it was a 2-week goalpost, then we can reevaluate where we are and see if we need to move it a little bit for you, or if you accomplished it. And when you're talking about impact, I was thinking about that situation there. And so I'm interested in your thought process in terms of creating this impact. What is your, I think advice is such a strong word, but I'm going to use it here, and I think people can understand the context of this question here, is what's your advice for the entrepreneur, the business leader, the executive, the community leader who wants to create an impact, but sees that they're either potentially falling short based off of some statistics, or they feel, it's more of a feeling that they're falling short? What's your advice for them while they're experiencing this?
Yeah, and it's a great question. In terms of creating impact, one of the things I've noticed is that, it's important to kind of really focus on the details, what drives that impact, versus having a high level goal of having impact. Like for example, like what I see sometimes is that, okay, we want to create, better student experience so that they feel more motivated, right? But that's a goal that we want to achieve. But that's only going to happen if our product works in a certain way that the students actually find useful. Right? So like translating that impact into something which is very tangible and kind of focusing our goal setting around that tangible goals is quite important. And there are so many ways we can spend our time and kind of make things better, but maybe kind of finding the real small goals that actually drives value towards that goal is more important than having that goal. And maybe measuring the high level statistics, like we do NPS, like product NPS, for example, right? We know what is our NPS, the net promoter score, essentially in our product. I mean, we get that and we measure that on a week-to-week basis. But if you say that our goal is to have higher NPS, but how do we get there? So then that comes down to kind of actually looking at the user feedback or talking to customers and truly understanding the problems and truly analyzing it, and then kind of creating plans to solve them, which are small steps. None of them is going to improve NPS tomorrow, but maybe 6 months down the line, it's going to change that. So that level of detail is probably what's important, I feel, because sometimes we stress around this, okay, I need higher NPS, my NPS is not going up. There's no way to solve that problem without having that detailed plan. The second thing I like to say is that, as you said, like that example, which is a goalpost, like we need to have high goals, but we can't stress about it. The moment we start stressing about it, it's just the fun is gone, right? So I think it's also kind of important to say that, okay, goal is it's a forcing function for you to think big and taking steps at every moment that actually drives big actions versus small, like, don't sweat the small stuff, like do the big things that's going to drive us there. It's a forcing function for us to do the right things. and not to just measure ourselves and, it's a game and we'll see where we land, right? We may go 100%, we may go 50%, but like one example I'll kind of comes to mind is that, one of our marketing managers, I mean, she was planning a conference and she came up with this idea, and it was an amazing idea to kind of bring all our clients together, and we'll invite all our users. And we were thinking, what should be the goal? And I said, look, and she was saying, okay, it's only happening next month. So maybe if we get 100 of our, clients show up, or, participants show up in this webinar, that would be great for us, or this conference, that'll be great for us. I said, okay, maybe we set a much bigger goal, like say 1,000. Let's say we say that we want to get 1,000 registrants for this conference. That probably is impossible in the next 1 month. But the reason why we set that goal is because then we will think big. Like we will do things that we would not do if we just set a goal of 100. So why don't we set a big goal? Why don't we come up with ideas that are going to push us towards that goal? And if we land at like 200 or 300, that's okay. Because we did things to get us to 100 and we'll learn something out of it, that, okay, we could not get to 1,000 because of these things, right? Next time when we do it, we'll something else. So that exercise and that conversation was very helpful, because then she said that, okay, now I understand. It's not a stress. If I go at 300, I'm not going to be like seen as I failed, but I can explain that, okay, I did these things to get to 1,000. I didn't get it because of, these reasons. This is what I learned out of it. And so it happens like we actually beat it. I remember that we had over like 1,100 registrations for that.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was amazing. She was amazed. I was amazed. And we never expected that. It's like, okay, we'll take whatever we get. But I think that is something I try to talk to my team, is that, okay, the reason we set big goals is to plan big, not to just always hit it. And, if you hit 50%, and that should be okay. I mean, we should not play the double game there, saying that, okay, how come you didn't meet it then? Because then it kind of really diffuses the culture at that point, right? I mean, the culture should be shoot high, but if you fail, that's good. Let's learn the lessons and figure out what should we do next time so that we can shoot high or higher.
I love that. And what I got from it was, it's more about the journey than the destination. And I think that is just, you just said it so perfectly. The whole thing about setting high goals, again, it goes to another quote that I love to talk about is, shoot for the moon, and if you don't get there, at least you'll land among the stars. And that's essentially the conversation I had with this individual, was really just about, that goal is there, and you got to forget about it. And actually, one of the exercises that we did together was literally making her forget about it. It was like, look, it's 2 weeks out. And today's not going to change whether it's 2 weeks out or not. So it's 2 weeks out. Now let's forget about the 2 weeks. Let's just focus on today. And the other thing I love that you talk about is what did I learn from it? That's another thing is so significant in this, is that if we accomplish a goal, that's great. But when we don't accomplish the goal, what did we learn out of that? What can we change? What can we do better next time to accomplish it? So I love all of those things. All right, I want to shift gears real quick as we start concluding. Forget about business. Forget about everything that we've been talking about. What do you like to do? What is one of the hobbies, what is sports, activities, fun thing you and your daughters enjoy doing? What's something that is just fun for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like with my daughters, I mean, one of the things we are trying now is roller skating and ice skating. So I'm learning with them. So they are learning, I'm learning with them. I love that. One thing I love about it is that I've always been very scared about actually skating all my life. I felt that I'll fall and I'll break my knee. But now I kind of started doing it. I was like, I need to put myself out there and see what the fears are. I'm going to work through that. And it's working. It's going well so far. So I'm very happy about it.
That's cool. So are you roller skating at a rink, or is this like roller skating outside, or?
It's a rink. It's a rink we have close by, so we can go there. And then, of course, in the wintertime, we'll go for ice skating a little bit. And she's much better than me, but I'm so far I haven't broken my legs, so I'm good.
Very cool. That's really cool. Well, I really enjoyed having you on the show today. Could you, just for our YouTube audience and for our listeners here, you could find the replay of this, or you could find, or maybe you found us here right on YouTube, Michael Esposito Inc. on YouTube. But could you just show us the shirt, because I love it. You and I are wearing our sponsored shirts. I love it. The Yellowdig shirt. It's so cool. And those are the Michael Esposito Inc. colors almost. If you look in my background there, you can see Michael Esposito Inc., more of a navy and a darker blue, but I love it. Really, really cool. Thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's been amazing.
Yes, no, thanks for the invitation, Michael. And it was really, truly enjoyable to speak with you. And yes, I'm glad that you're doing this. And anybody who wants to kind of find me, just look me on LinkedIn. It's very easy to find me there, Shaunak Roy. And if you want to look about Yellowdig, just go to our website, yellowdig.co, and you'll get a bunch of information there.
Yep. And of course, all of those links will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been really great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.